Hi, I'm Corey and welcome to Creating with Scraps. This video is going to hopefully be a short one, just answering some questions from one of my previous videos, or a couple of my previous videos, and discussing what's coming next. One of the questions I received a lot was die cuts, sizes of die cuts and papers, and how to get a clean cut with die cuts and how to color them and a variety of things. Well, and I've showed it once before, but maybe I didn't go into enough detail, or in any way, I'm happy to show it again because I love playing with die cuts. First and foremost, coloring die cuts. I get that question a lot. I start with, sometimes it'll be on white cardstock or off-white cardstock, just kind of whatever I have. I use scraps. Like these were some cut-offs from a page. And so I'll start with just, my paper. And I almost always use cardstock. Okay, well, I always use cardstock, whether it is patterned cardstock like you see here, or if it's a solid colored cardstock, simply because these go through a lot of steps and they're already thin. These flower pieces especially are already thin. And cardstock just gives them a little more stability. So I'll use cardstock, and then I'll do a whole bunch of these at once, whatever flowers or what have you, or shapes that I want. And then I'll color them. And then the way I color them, I don't always do it the same. You can use colored pencils or inks or colored markers or distress crayons or watercolor, whatever you like. And these were colored in a variety of different things. But my process is kind of like with the way I do clusters. They're similar. I'll do a whole bunch at once. And so here, like for example, all those different colors, right? I'll take a couple different pads, like here. These are the Tim Holtz Distress Ink pads, and these happen to be Rusty Hinge, Wild Honey, and Scattered Straw. And then I'll smush them. I'll open the pad and just like that, put a little bit on my desk. And I've got a bunch of stuff here, so I don't want to do too much. But I'll do the same thing with all three of the colors. And then give it maybe one squirt of water. And then I'll move the die through those colors. And that's why I get those different colors on the die. I'll do it, these were made at different times, so there's different colors in there. But same thing with this. I just moved it through the ink at different times. And here I did it partially. So I did the top only. I left the bottom to go through a green later, or I colored it with a green pen. But I just put the top of that flower in there. And then I went back with maybe a pencil or something and added just a little bit of a brown, I think, a darker color to give me that shading. Same idea here. I just put the tips of those flowers through. Here, because these are so small, I think I used watercolors. I just took my watercolor travel pad. You can use any kind of watercolors. I just have this little travel set, and I opened it up, and I'm like, oh, I think I want to use a couple shades of yellow. And so I used that at the top, and then I went and put some green for the stems, where, I don't know how well you can see that green, where I wanted the stems to be. And I did the same thing here, just playing with the color. And I think this one was the Distress Ink, not watercolor, but it's the same idea, same principle. So maybe I put this mostly through no, that one's done with markers. I just colored the stems with markers, and then I colored the flowers with a couple different colors of ink at the top. And almost all of them are done exactly the same way. It doesn't really matter. You can use different colors and different blends of colors. Here, this one was kind of a fun one. Just pulling it through ink. Maybe that was towards the end of the ink, and this is towards the beginning of the ink, where it's a little bit darker. And I like the different colors, which is why I do it that way. So all of these were done essentially the same way. And you can see here, I just played with different colors and different amounts of different colors. So these are the same, and then I just added a little bit of a lighter color up to the top. I'm not a colorist by any means, and there's a lot of ways much better than what I do to get different and better effects, but that's kind of how I go about getting it. And then these, again, were pulled through the Distress Ink. And yes, I'm going to remember to wipe that up before I move on. Oh, I just dropped something. Sorry about that. You can do, you know, like I did some stems here, and then I went in with darker marker for the tops of these, for the tips, edges, to give them different looks. And it's, you can see it's the same thing with just some different colors of ink, just to give different looks. And you can see there, pulling them through the green, I pulled them through at different times. So I got different amounts of ink. And I don't always just use those darker colors, but, you know, played here. I think this one was a watercolor one, simply because it's so fine and detailed watercolor the leaves, and then just added a little bit of pink. Maybe I used marker on that one. That one looks more like marker. Maybe I used just a green marker and then maybe 2 shades of pink marker. And I'm not careful or precise or anything like that. I'll just kind of throw the color down, throw the color on there, and hope for the best. Sorry, I'm going to clean that up before I, excuse me, before I move on, because otherwise I'll have that ink all over everything. And when I'm done, I just take a baby wipe and wipe up whatever's left. I know some people hate to waste ink and they'll put paper through it and such, but that was just a really small amount. All right, and what to use, what to color with? Well, you can use colored pencils. You can use distress crayons, like the simple travel watercolor. I think I got it on clearance for just not many bucks at all. Watercolor. I use these pretty frequently simply because they're right next to my desk. The Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. There's 80 of these guys. And I've never not had a color that I needed. And again, you can use the Tim Holtz Distress ink. I use these 2 colors, Forest Moss and Peeled Paint, pretty frequently when I'm doing a bunch of green or green stems. So just play with what you like. If you're not sure which colors are yours, or which are your favorites, just, they sell these in the little cubes too, the 1-inch cubes. I guess they're 1 inch, about 1 inch. Yeah, 1-ish inch, 1.5 inch, 1 1/4. They're 1 1/4 inch cubes, and they sell them in this size as well. And, you know, you pick them up on sale at Michael's or another box store, and try them, see what you like. They're not spendy that way. Okay, so color them, and then I let the color dry if it's a wet color before I do the next step. So I cut them, and then I color them, and then I will, sorry, I've got so many things over here that I don't want to drop anymore. And then I'll go and emboss them. And I didn't clarify, and I apologize for that. The Seth Apter Vintage Beeswax, that is my preference, excuse me, excuse me, is an embossing powder. I use this little container because, you know, it's just easy to get in and out of, but that's what it is. And you can get it at Emerald Creek Co. or SethApter.com. And now it goes out of stock frequently, so I couldn't tell you if it's in stock right now, but that's what I use, and that's where I get it. And the big thing, the reason I like it so much is it's got a variety of finishes and textures in here. It gives it kind of a really cool look. Like this is just standard detail clear embossing powder, and it's all pretty uniform, and it works fine too. And then this is the really cool distress glaze, embossing glaze that Tim Holtz sells, and it does it in different colors. And I put this on the top too, and it's a translucent finish, so it will highlight the color. You can still see the color that's underneath, but it'll just give you a sheen of whatever color your embossing glaze is, and it's kind of a cool finish. But you can see even these 3, they're very different, so you get different effects. And you know, this is my choice most of the time, simply because I like it, and it is embossing powder. And then so I've got these colored here. I'll do these pretty quick, and I'll apologize, I don't have the skill set yet to start and stop my videos, so I have to share the loud heat gun. And I emboss, and I put the embossing powder down separate from the embossing ink. You can use, you know, like that little cube. You could use an embossing pad. You can use, and this is a distress dauber. You can use, for the really fine detail ones, I'll use my embossing pen. So any of these work. VersaFine Detail Clear is a great embossing pad. I'm sure there's lots of others. These are just the ones I'm used to. So let's see. This was done. These were, I think, both done. Oh no, I pulled the stem of this one through some green ink, and then this one I colored with green ink. So you can see there's not a big difference in the way they're done. They haven't been embossed yet. And then I literally scribbled some color on the top with pens. Not careful, not precise, didn't blend. These, you can use your Copic markers, but I didn't. Super, super, super simple. Now, different types of markers and stuff give you permanent or non-permanent inks. It seals the ink, and I don't go into all that. But you can see here, mine, I've pulled it through color before, and I just, if I need to, I just clean it off at the edge when I move on to another color. So I'll come in and I'll put embossing ink, clear embossing ink over the top, and I put my tweezers, here we go, because it's going to be sticky now. So then I will take it, this is the one I emboss on. No, this is the one I put the embossing ink on, and then where I put the powder on, I use a different one. Now I have an embossing tray, but it's not at hand, so I'm not going to grab it. But I'll use a different paper because I don't want to waste my embossing powder on the sticky sheet. Because the way I emboss these, I could open this up and run my die through the ink, or press it down on a pad, and I've done that too and got inky fingers, but this also works real well. Just make sure I get some embossing glaze on that, and that might move some of the colors around a little bit, and I don't mind because I'm not going for a pristine perfect look. And then I'll do the same thing and move this over and put it in the embossing powder. I could pour more on too, and I'll do that sometimes, but the idea is just to get some embossing powder. Let's see if you can see it. Maybe you can see it. Get some embossing powder on those die cuts. Okay, just all over the, whoops, that's upside down. The whole thing. So embossing powder. And now before I heat it, and I apologize in advance about the loud sound, before I heat these, I put away, so I'll do a whole bunch of these at once, right? I'll cut a whole bunch at once, I'll color a whole bunch at once, and I'll put the embossing powder on, and then I'll put the embossing glaze and the embossing powder. And because this stuff is so fine, and because I don't want to waste it, I will put it away before I use the heat gun, simply because it will blow everywhere. I know that firsthand. I'm telling you, it blows. So there you go. Let me move these out of the way. Now, if you're making a card or something larger and you're embossing it, I would encourage you to hold it up to get the air from the heat gun to move through. But for these little itty bitty pieces, if I pick it up, I'm going to get some of that embossing powder off on my hand. Oh, let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. I'll move these up so you can see what happens. And it'll be loud, and I apologize. You may want to adjust your volume. And when I do this, I warm up the gun, the heat gun, heating tool, shouldn't call it a gun, a heat tool up a little bit first, because I don't want to burn the paper. So I apologize. I'll give it a moment or two to heat up a little bit. It doesn't take long because this one's Stampin' Up, and I imagine it's 20 years old. I've had it for a long time. So I'll let it warm up, and then I'll use my tweezers, and these have these little gaps, and I'll hold them down there because when you heat emboss it, the embossing glaze is sticky until it dries. Now, if you've got a card and you're just heating an image on a card, it's easy to avoid that glaze with your fingers. But with this, it's not so easy to do because my entire image is being embossed. Now, you want the heat to pass through the paper. That keeps it from getting burnt, which is why like if it's a card, I'll pick it up and heat emboss it. But with this, I'm just holding it in place. And it's small enough and fine enough that that I don't have a problem with it burning. It gets enough air movement. And you can, I don't know how well you can see it. I've got the big old gun in there and glass underneath it. But you can see when it melts, when the embossing powder on top melts. It changes color, it changes appearance. Okay, I think those are both done. And then I just let them cool for a moment, and they don't take long at all, but I let them cool for a moment before I pick them up. And you can see all the imperfections in my coloring. I guess it's the properties of that embossing powder, but you can see how it just kind of like looks like it's, I don't know, highlighted, I guess. And here, look at how much more vibrant the colors are in that little itty bitty piece. So that is my technique. That's all I do with these. And then, so these are done now, and I would, you know, audition them basically. You know, I'll grab a cluster, and maybe that's a little too bright for that cluster, or are those colors, or maybe I need, you know, I'll just start playing with some of the bases that I've got and put the pieces on. That's kind of pretty. I kind of like that one together, and they fit well. So maybe I would do that. Here, let me zoom back out. So maybe I would do that, or maybe I would do this one, you know, because I like the blue and the green together, or however. And that part doesn't matter, but it's, excuse me, the idea is that you just finish a whole bunch of pieces, and then when you're ready to put them on something, on your bases, you've got a whole bunch ready to go. It's one of my favorite ways to use up scraps. So, all right, I hope that answered the coloring questions. The cutting questions. I had a couple questions about what I use and how I cut these pieces. Like I said, I use cardstock, and just my own personal preference. So I'll grab a piece of, here, I'll just use this scrap piece of cardstock. I already started it. And I'll lay it down where I want it on my paper, and then I'll use a piece of purple tape to hold it in place. And then I will get the embossing plates. Now these are older. They've kind of worn smooth. I have a new set to replace, but these are still working, so I'm going to keep using them while they're working. And then I'll sandwich it. So here you can see I've got the paper die with the cutting side toward the paper, and then the tape to hold it in place, and I'll sandwich it, and then I flip it. I just feel like when the die's plates are up, I get a better cut. Is that necessarily true? No, I don't know, but that's the impression I get. And then I'll get my little machine. I use this 90+% of the time. And Tim Holtz shared a trick. If you're going to die cut a lot, this is a glass mat, and it works really well with this. I'll just put a squirt of water on my glass surface, and then this is a suction pad. So when I put my die cut machine down, I mean, I can move it if I really push, but it holds it really sturdy, so it holds it in place. It's not flying all over. All right, put my sandwich back together, and because these are a little bit older, I'll use a shim, and a shim is just a piece of cardstock or paper. I think this was a file folder, and I'll put it through and run it through my machine. See, I even wrote on there how wide I can make my paper just to remind myself. And then I'll run it through again. And if for some reason it doesn't cut all the way through, it usually does, but if for some reason it doesn't, I've got that piece of tape in place, right? So if it's like, oh man, I can see it didn't cut here, or what have you, I can just roll it through again. Maybe I'll add an extra shim if it's not cutting. And then I will take it out. And this is a pretty fine detailed, no, it's not one of the super intricate ones. Where did I put it? Here we go. That, you know, some of the more fancy dies, but this is still pretty thin and pretty detailed. And then I'll just use my pokey tool and pop it out. I use the Cricut one, but any of them work basically. And then maybe I'll pop that out. Usually it pops right out, but because I'm on camera, I guess it's not. And if I need to pull it like this, it's cardstock, so it's a little bit thicker. So pop out the extra pieces, the negative space pieces, and there's my completed die. Maybe one thing that I could suggest too is using, you know, decent quality dies. I know a lot of people buy from Wish or AliExpress, and I don't know what the quality of those dies is like. Honestly, I've not used them, but I use Tim Holtz all the time, and Simon Says Stamp frequently, and I have a couple of Hero Arts and Waffle Flower and some other brands, and I have had good luck with those. But a tip is make sure, like you can see here, there's some white, or my card is left in those negative spaces. Well, make sure you clear out all the little bits before you cut any subsequent dies, because with the paper in there, it doesn't give the metal of the die sufficient depth to cut. So make sure all the little bits are out. And that is how I get a fairly decent impression with my die. And then when I take this up, I just twist it, and it will remove from my glass surface. All right, moving these aside. Next question. Another question I got was size of the dies. You know, somebody said, well, I have Tim Holtz dies and they're all really big. And there are some Tim Holtz flowers that are really large, you know, different lengths. This is a size I used often because it's long and thin, and I really like it. It goes in this set. But you can see, even among these sets, like this one's probably 6-7 inches maybe. And this is a different set, and it's notably, well, here, let me zoom out just a little bit more. It is notably smaller. It's thinner and it's smaller. You know, Tim has a whole bunch of these, or Sussex Tim, I don't know, Tim's the designer for Sussex, I guess. A whole bunch of different sizes and shapes. And here, these are another set of larger ones, kind of like an in-between. So like these are really fat, and these are a little bit smaller, and these are a little bit smaller. And here's one with a lot of leaves with it. So, you know, there's a whole bunch of different sizes, but even in these, there's different looks. Like here, look at this one. This one is, if you were looking at like this die compared to say this die, well, they're die flowers, but they're a lot different in size. And then there's another set that he has, so I have it here, yeah. This is a mason jar flower set. Well, these flowers are even smaller still. This flowers and stems and leaves, and sorry if the overhead light glare. There's a whole variety of sizes in these, and I use these pretty frequently too. I just don't put them in the jar. I'll cut them out when I want smaller flowers. Another tip to get, you know, more money from your dies is like this particular set, and it's 665221. If you look here, your flowers have lots and lots of different stems. So if you're wanting something a little bit smaller, if you want something bigger, you can layer the stems. But if you're wanting something a little bit smaller, here, I'll just grab some of these that are already done. So let's say this is just a little bit too tall for what I want, right? So the card I want to put it on, or the space that I have available, the way these are set up, it's really easy to come snip off a little bit, and I just made it, you know, shorter, smaller, and I can do that as much or as little as I want. Sometimes I'll tear these when I make them, and I'll use just this little itty bitty bit. So look at ways to cut your dies apart, your die cut pieces, I should say. Cut your die cut pieces apart when you're considering smaller sizes. Like here you go, this is the tip that I cut off. Maybe I'd use that on something. Okay, so that's oh, here, this is another one that's really fun. It's a colorize, and the colorize are designed to cut in different colors of cardstock and layer the pieces together. Well, you don't have to layer the pieces if you don't want to. You might recognize these. I use these quite frequently because they're a fabulous size. They're, what, this one's probably 2 inches, and this one's probably 2.5 or so. And rather than putting the next layer on top, I'll just color them with my markers. So I'll use my colorized dies that way. All right, I think that was everything with dies, except, oh, if you want a subtle sheen, I don't have anything colored that's right here. This is our sweet friend Gail did Gail glitter for her Initially You 2022 kickoff. And it was fabulous because I forget about glitter a lot because glitter kind of makes my eye twitch. I love the color, but I taught primary grades for a while, and glitter is not my friend. But I love the sparkly sheen. And so there's other ways to get it. You can use embossing powder with a little bit of glitter or sparkle. This is Wink of Stella. And so once I've colored an image, it's just a little painty brush, and I can go over the top and it'll give it a little bit of a sparkle and sheen. And so I really appreciated her reminder to, glitter doesn't have to be glitter. It can be, you know, things with glitter in it, like the stickles that she uses. Somebody else, excuse me, asked a question about these Nuvo Deluxe crystal drops and what they do and what they look like. And what they do is they just add a tiny bit of dimension. This one happens to be black. I almost always, when I'm putting it on eyes of a critter or wanting to highlight something, I'll open it up and put a little bit on a scratch surface first to make sure that there's no air bubbles in there. And you don't touch the tip to your paper, you just get it close. And that way you can squeeze, you know, as big of it. My cave is cold, so it's probably, oh, here we go, I did get some out. You can, you know, put a big dot or a tiny, just a tiny little bit. And it looks like I'm touching the surface, but I'm not. I'm just really close to it. Sorry, it's cold in here, so it's a little more difficult to use. Okay, there we go. Oops, so you can see I touched the surface. I went down too low. And I have that little peak. And see what happens is the peak, well, it's cold enough that it'll settle. And it's just a fine little dot, and it'll give it a chance to dry. But when it dries, it gives you a little bit of a sheen and a tiny little bit of a dimension. So that's what that product was. Somebody else asked that I show them how I fill my bottle. This is the one I use all the time, and this is my refill. Now, again, it's cold in my cave, and I don't know how well this is going to work, but I don't usually have any major issues. Last time I tried to do this, it didn't cooperate, so let's hope it plays nicely this time. A viewer said that she squeezes the bottle first, and there's a science term for it, and it's escaping me, but it creates a vacuum essentially, and then it pulls as you pour glue in, you release this, and it pulls the glue towards the bottom. I haven't had great luck with that. I make that overflow. So what I do is I keep distance between the two tips, and I'll hold this at an angle, and I'll just try to keep it off the sides when I'm filling it. I don't know how well you can see that. I try to keep it off the sides of the neck of the bottle as I'm filling it, simply because it kind of creates a log jam. If I let this flow just straight down in the center in a fine tip, I'm able to fill it up usually in a fairly decent time frame. I know, I can't believe I'm showing people who are watching her fill her glue bottle. But I've had a couple different people ask about how I fill the glue and how I transfer one to the other, and this is how I do it. And since I'm all about sharing ideas and tips, that's what I'm doing. On that note, while this is filling, sharing ideas and tips. I know that, there you go, and now my bottle's full. Several people have asked about organization, and I'm mostly organized, but I can always learn something new. And Cara Brandon Creates has a challenge going on, a Get Organized challenge right now. So if you're wanting some organization ideas and such, be sure and give her channel a look. Ink. Okay, proof positive that even though I was a 911 dispatcher for a lot of years, I can't always multitask. In my initial kickoff to 2022, I mentioned that a lot of different artists use different kinds of ink, and for the life of me, I couldn't say it correctly. Now, I know Gail generally chooses vintage photo, but I said walnut stain in the video. And you don't have to ink. Wendy doesn't ink. I mean, she used to, but she doesn't anymore. She's chosen not to. And here are 4 really common colors for people who like the distress ink, and you just get different looks. So let's see, I grabbed some blending tools. I grabbed some of that, and you can see, here we go, here's a black one, the different colors. This is just a scratch piece. So here is Black Suit, right? And I don't know how well this is going to show up, but it's kind of got like a dark, not quite black, but mostly gray image at the edge, right? Okay, so that's Black Suit. I use that one for specific things, but not a lot of things. When I want something dark, I'll use ground espresso. That's my kind of go-to for dark. And here, I'll pull this over so you can see what I mean. So it's just a little bit darker, and it's an actual brown. Brushed corduroy is kind of an orangey brown, but ground espresso, oh, here we go, you can see it that way, is kind of a little bit darker brown. So if I want something just a smidge darker, I'll use ground espresso. Walnut stain's the one I reach for, the one I keep in my tray, and the one I use pretty much all the time. You can see my blending tool is really dirty. And walnut stain. And you can go as heavy or as light as you want. You can build ink. You can build depth with color by blending more on there. So that's walnut stain. And so you can see it's just a little bit lighter than that ground espresso. And vintage photo is the one that Gail uses quite frequently. Tracy texted me or sent me a message saying that she usually uses walnut stain. That's her go-to, but I've seen her use other colors as well, I believe. And so this is vintage photo. It's just got a little bit more of an orange, I guess maybe that's, I don't even know if that's the right word, an orange cast. So those are the different colors. And then Marlies uses, Sue uses a variety of colors. I've seen her ink in a whole bunch of different colors with her Stampin' Up! Pads and different things as well, because that's kind of the look that she likes. And then Marlies uses archival ink. They come in larger pads too, but she uses these. And this gives, do I have any more blending tools? This gives an entirely different look. It doesn't have the spread properties, I guess, of the Distress ink, and I don't know if there's a name for that or not, but it doesn't have those same properties. And so she'll use these archival ink. You can see it doesn't spread quite as much. It gives you a little bit more of a fine line. So just depending on what you want and what you're wanting to do. Now the Distress inks, if you get them wet or I mix other like paint or colors or whatever in there, they'll spread. Whereas these archival inks, once they're dry, they will not. They're meant to be permanent. So keep that in mind as you're choosing. And I want to say I got this little set with a coupon or something, and it was under $10. Well, I don't remember what the cost was, but it was not spendy. So if you want to try different things, I would encourage you to do that. All right, let me move these out of the way. And I think, oh, I did have another question. I'll answer that question and we'll move on. Okay. Next question was the Nuvo Deluxe Crystal Glaze, and she couldn't get it to stop bowing or curling when she used the glaze. And the reason I have found for that is this one is done on copy paper, thin copy paper. And if I don't have it, I mean, you could copy paper, you can open it back up or fold it back down. But if you don't have it on glued down when you're putting the glaze on and you're just putting it on top of copy paper, it will curl. Couple ways to avoid that: use less. You don't need as much as you think. You just want to give a smooth, even coat over the top. And again, you can straighten it up afterwards. That works fine. But I don't get that curl when I use cardstock. So I print my Tracy labels almost always on cardstock. And I don't know if you can see the difference in there, but I don't have a problem with them curling. And I like a little bit thicker. The other thing you can do is if you're using the thin paper, like here I used one of these Tim Holtz stickers. It's thinner. I'll glue it down to whatever surface I'm working on first, and then I'll add the glaze to the top, and then I don't have that problem with it curling. So there you go. This kickoff has been fabulous for me because it reminds me to do things kind of outside my comfort zone. When I first got back into paper crafting after my break from scrapbooking, I did a couple swaps and such. I was in a swap group, and I had so much fun making these pocket letters. And I'm in Sophie's notes. Our recent challenge was to make a pocket letter, and I guess this was a reminder: go outside your comfort zone. These aren't necessarily colors or styles that I normally work with, but I really like them, and it was a whole lot of fun to pull out products. I used some edged leaf, gold leaf type stuff that I've had for 15-20 years. And anyway, so I encourage you get inspiration from people and do things that are outside of your comfort zone. Last thing is, in 2022, two more things real quick. I will put the 8x8, the dimensions for the 8x8 Stamperia Forest, and then I don't remember which brand this was, the other one. When I make the inserts, I will put the dimensions, and I'll add them to that first video, the Stamperia Forest flip through. I'll add the dimensions that I used there. It'll be a week or so, but I will put them up because it's not fair to ask you to convert them. I'm going to do, with this one, I'll do the same. They won't look identical by any means, but I'll use the same configurations for each of the inserts, and then I'll put the dimensions up on that, and they can be transferred to whichever woodland forest or what have you this is, and then the Stamperia Forest. So I'll put that in the one that says Stamperia Forest flip through. And then this year I intend to not maybe do as many series videos, but I will do a little like one-offs. And the whole theme is Inspired by You Tube in 2022. And I'm going to start that off with how I was inspired by the ladies who did the initial kickoff with me. With Tracy, when I watched her video, it really encouraged me to make an idea journal. Well, I love idea books and journals, as many of you may know. But how she did it, I don't usually do traveler's notebook style, and I don't usually, when I'm making an idea book, I tend to put all the same paper together so that the focus is on the idea and not the paper. But it was really kind of fun to use different papers like I would in a more traditional journal. And I had a lot of fun putting different, I made a little pocket to put her cheat sheets and stuff on. But I used, some bags and just a whole variety of papers that oh, here, like this is the paper cloth, the ADA cloth in paper. And it was fun to do that, and it'll be really fun to follow along. She's gotten a couple start already, and I just have not yet had a chance. I made the book, but I haven't yet had the chance to get going on them. But anyway, so I was inspired by Tracy, and then Marley's too, with her mixed media. Kind of took a song book or some such thing, and was altering those pages. And so I'm going to include her ideas in here, and stamps, all the different ways you can use stamps. So one of these sections I'll dedicate to Sue, and I'll use what she shared in her video to remind myself of the different ways to use stamps. I'll include that in here. And then the sparkle, Gail used glitter, and a reminder to use glitter. So I'll put some images in and use Wink of Stella and maybe like stickles or something. I'm not quite brave enough for regular glitter, but those. And then Wendy, fabulous idea of taking something she'd already done. She took a product that she'd made 3 years ago that had been popular with people, and she kind of reinvented it. She added some washi and changed it up a little bit. And what a super reminder that we can take something that we've done in the past and change one or two things and kind of get a whole new look. And that's exactly what I mean by making it you. Be inspired by all the fabulous people around you, and then take it and make it your own preferences and your own style. Okay, I said this was going to be short, and it's not, but there you go. Thank you for watching. Happy creating, and I'll look forward to seeing you again soon.